The therapy industry is broken. I've been a therapist for over 16 years, and I believe therapy is supposed to be about profound self-discovery, deep personal transformation, and genuine psychological growth. It's about learning to recognize and accept all the different parts of ourselves, even the unpleasant parts, and it's about working to become more whole. But instead of this, a lot of therapy today is more about labels, checklists, and feel-good validation that doesn't actually help people at all. And a lot of people go to therapy expecting a profound and stimulating process, but what they actually get is something superficial. A therapist who just smiles, nods, and tells them exactly what they want to hear, or a therapist that throws around fancy jargon and labels and coping skills without helping the person to make meaning of their experience. And the worst part? People who get this kind of underwhelming therapy don't even realize they're getting gypped. Welcome to the metaphor of gender. I'm Sasha, a therapist, and this is a channel for curious people who prefer deep thinking over dogma. We explore identity, meaning, and how to live life well. So today I want to explain why I'm fighting to preserve the integrity and value of therapy, and what has happened to me because of this commitment. I became a therapist because I've always been fascinated by people and how we behave. We are all so dramatically different from one another, yet at the core, we share some fundamental things in common. We're all full of contradictions at times, but we're also cohesive and whole. Maybe this issue of wholeness, which you'll hear me talk about a lot on the channel, is so important to me because I've often felt like I contain a lot of disparate parts. I grew up in an Egyptian American family, moving across multiple cities, states, and even countries. I've had a lot of completely unrelated hobbies, things like horseback riding, dance performance, and heavy weight training. I tend to build friendships with people from totally different walks of life, and I'm really drawn to outsiders, people who challenge norms and ask big questions about life. And it took me a long time to figure out how these very different elements of my personality all fit together and make me whole. Sort of like being a chameleon who's still the same person at heart. I spent my early career working in lots of different settings: crisis and trauma counseling, behavioral therapy, disabilities programs, and schools. All of that was before going into private practice. But across these different work experiences, I always tried to remain intensely curious about the people in my care and focus on their specific, unique circumstances, gifts, and challenges. I really try to bring compassion and discernment to my therapy work rather than just nodding along or following some step-by-step therapy manual. And this is something that is not popular to say these days, but I'm going to say it anyway. Real therapy is about change. It's not just about feeling validated, but it's about seeing yourself more clearly, challenging your unhelpful patterns, and then building a life that actually works for you. And frankly, that kind of change is not always easy. In fact, it rarely is. Now, of course, it's true, therapy sometimes provides comfort, but that's not the ultimate goal. Therapy should challenge you to better navigate the difficult realities of your life. And frankly, therapy isn't about memorizing mental health jargon or diagnosing all of your relatives, though it is tempting. It's a deep, transformative relationship between the client and the therapist that should leave you changed for the better. But somewhere along the way, therapy got hijacked. And I really empathize with people who feel stuck in their life and sign up for therapy. They're probably nervous but hopeful because they think it's really going to help them change things. Maybe they imagine therapy will be profound and insightful and that they'll come away from it really transformed. But instead, they get a watered-down, ineffective version of what therapy is supposed to be. And look, therapy is not magic, so I don't want to inflate the expectations here. But therapy is not supposed to be a place to have all your original ideas validated and rubber stamped. So why does so much of modern therapy look like that? There are lots of reasons for this. There's insurance coverage, for-profit certification programs, pharmaceutical companies, and the rise of this mental health industry. But one of the biggest reasons is that therapy has become about short-term gratification and about making people more comfortable in the immediate moment. For example, a really disturbing trend in therapy is to label relatives, friends, or romantic partners as toxic and suggest that the client goes no contact at the very first sign of conflict. Another unhelpful trend is to confirm whatever a client already believes rather than remaining curious and exploring alternative possibilities or challenging some assumptions. Instead of a real psychological process, a lot of therapy today is just reduced to pop psych slogans, trendy diagnoses, and quick fix validation. It's almost like this kind of superficial therapy helps people to curate a blissed out life that avoids all tension, conflict, or difficulty. But of course, it's also devoid of meaningful contemplation and even some of the discomfort which is often necessary for growth. This trend towards customer satisfaction in therapy and superficial platitudes is very much present in gender and identity-related therapies. Before we get into this, I want to briefly discuss a term that's become quite common: affirmation. Now, it comes up in the context of gender-affirming care. Broadly speaking, affirmation as a therapeutic technique originally meant helping clients challenge negative self-beliefs. So, for example, if a client said in therapy, "I'm worthless," the therapist might challenge that belief and help the person develop positive affirmations such as, "I am capable and worthy of love." So there's a certain place and time where affirmation can be a powerful therapeutic tool. Plus, it just sounds good too, right? Who wouldn't want to be affirmed? And what therapist wouldn't want to affirm their client? But when it comes to gender, it could be very helpful to remain curious and non-judgmental. For example, tell me about your identity. What does that mean to you? Therapy would be the perfect place to discuss and explore the origins, meanings, possibilities, and limitations related to somebody's identity. Now, if that's affirmation, then it sounds like a really great starting point for a good therapeutic process. But gender affirmation, like so many other kinds of therapeutic techniques, has become more of a checklist, a mechanical, one-size-fits-all scripted interaction that has two simple goals: to agree with the person's self-perception and to approve a medical transition process. Let me show you what I mean. This counseling center meets with patients one time to determine if they can provide a letter for surgery. One meeting is all it takes to discuss one of the most important decisions you'll ever make in your life? People are calling this therapy. How is that ethical? And this is not an isolated or unusual case. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of families whose children were seen just one time and recommended to medically transition. And those were minors. So you know that adults are definitely not getting the opportunity to explore these ideas more deeply before making such a big decision. So how and why is this happening? In addition to some of the factors I mentioned before, there's another very important reason why this trend has come to dominate in the field of gender therapy. Psychologists and therapists have made the mistake of treating gender identity in the exact same way that you might treat a sexual orientation. Let me explain what I mean. If a person tells their therapist that they're having same-sex crushes or they suspect they might be gay, the therapist would simply affirm that this is perfectly healthy, normal, and they'd help the patient explore and come to terms with these feelings. Now, I don't want to make it sound like that's a simple process. It can be really hard for some people to accept those feelings in themselves. But either way, some people think, well, why would we not approach gender identity in the exact same way? Well, being attracted to someone doesn't require any medical interventions. But people who are exploring a cross-sex identity or non-binary gender might end up seeking to change their bodies, And to do so, they need medical interventions, which are often permanent and have lifelong impacts. In addition, being gay doesn't put you at odds with your body or material reality, whereas a cross-sex or non-binary identity often comes with a direct conflict between one's desires and their physical body. The point is, affirming sexual orientation is just not the same thing as signing off on a gender transition. But these days, a lot of therapists treat these two things the exact same way. And you know what? I've been vocal about the problems with gender-affirming therapy and how it's being practiced this way. I think it's incomplete, and in fact, it's not really therapy at all. Remember, therapy is about better understanding yourself and deep personal transformation. And because I've stood up for what I believe to be real therapy, activists have tried to destroy my career. When it comes to people in my practice or colleagues and friends, I have a solid reputation as being thoughtful and caring. So much so, actually, that some people who also share my concerns about gender-affirming therapy think I am too nuanced and too compassionate. The bottom line is that some people are upset with me for taking things slow regarding gender, while others are mad at me for being too supportive and respectful of trans adults. So you know what I do? I remain curious. I try to learn things from my clients and families every day, and I also try to speak with integrity and tell the truth as I see it. And if I upset people, so be it. And I'm going to continue standing up for real therapy because I believe, actually I know because I've seen it in my own practice, that having a real therapeutic process, learning to understand yourself better, and working towards wholeness is a good thing, period. Because whether someone explores a different identity or medically transitions, those are deeply personal decisions that should be made carefully. And actually, therapy is precisely the place to dive into these possibilities in a way that respects their importance, their meaning, and their impact on someone's life. I believe everyone considering such huge decisions deserves to have a therapeutic process that is respectful and compassionate, but also engaging, thought-provoking, and thorough. Therapy should be about deep, individualized exploration, not about activism or checking boxes before surgery. Now, if you see the value of real therapy too, then I'm really glad you're here, and I know you're going to get a lot out of this channel. All right, that's it for today. Keeping one foot in reality and one in possibility. I'll see you next time. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. That really helps me to keep this channel going. And please tell me your thoughts below. To join me in exploring more interesting questions, click on this video. Thanks and see you next time. This information is meant for educational purposes only and not as a substitute for mental health services.